I still remember the look on my mother's face. Not fear, not concern, just irritation. I was 17, sitting at our kitchen table, trying to catch my breath. Every inhale felt smaller than the last, like someone was slowly tightening an invisible rope around my chest. My hands shook as I reached for my inhaler, but it was empty. "Mom," I whispered, barely able to speak. I can't breathe." She didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, here we go again," she sighed. "You're always so dramatic whenever you don't want to do something." I stared at her, hoping she'd realize this wasn't one of our usual arguments. My lips were starting to tingle, my vision blurred around the edges. "Dad," I gasped as he walked into the kitchen. He glanced at me for barely a second before setting his car keys on the counter. "Your mother says you're acting again," he said with a tired smile. "You know, one day people will stop believing you if you keep doing this." "Acting?" I couldn't even stand up anymore. I slid from my chair onto the floor, desperately trying to pull air into my lungs. Every breath sounded like a tiny whistle. My chest burned, and panic sped through my body faster than I could control. "I need help." My younger brother stood frozen near the doorway. He looked terrified. "Mom," he whispered. "She doesn't look okay." "She's fine," my mother replied, without even turning around. "She's just trying to get attention." Those words shattered something inside me. Not because they hurt, because I realized my own parents had already decided I wasn't worth believing. This wasn't the first time. Ever since I was little, every illness, every injury, every fear was dismissed. If I had a fever, they said I wanted to skip school. If I cried, I was too sensitive. If I struggled, I was lazy. Eventually, I stopped asking for help. But this time, this wasn't stress. This wasn't anxiety. This was my body shutting down. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and somehow managed to press the emergency call button. I couldn't even finish my sentence before everything around me became distant. The last thing I heard before collapsing was my father saying, "See, she even called emergency services. She's really committed to this performance." But what none of them knew was that within minutes, our front door would open, and the truth would leave every person in that house completely speechless. The next thing I remember was hearing unfamiliar voices. "Move back. She's not getting enough oxygen." Someone gently placed an oxygen mask over my face while another checked my pulse. Everything felt blurry, but I could still hear my parents trying to explain themselves. "We thought she was pretending," my mother said nervously. One of the paramedics looked directly at her. "Pretending?" His voice was calm, but his expression changed instantly after checking my breathing. She was minutes away from losing consciousness completely. Silence filled the kitchen. I was rushed into the ambulance while my parents followed behind in their car. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Tests confirmed what the paramedics already suspected. I had suffered a severe asthma attack. My inhaler had expired weeks earlier. The doctors asked why I hadn't replaced it. I quietly answered, "I told my parents." My mother immediately interrupted. "She never told us it was serious." I looked at her with tears filling my eyes. "I told you 3 times." The room became painfully quiet. The doctor mucked through my medical records. I also see she missed her last 2 asthma follow-up appointments. Again, my parents had no answer, because they had canceled both appointments saying I was exaggerating my condition. That realization hurt more than the attack itself. While I recovered in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think. I kept asking myself one question. Why had I spent my whole life trying to earn love from people who never listened? When I was finally discharged, something inside me had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. And for the first time, I decided I would stop begging to be believed. I quietly gathered every medical report, every prescription, every canceled appointment, every text message where I had asked for help. Then I made copies. I also accepted an offer from my aunt, who had always believed me, to move into her home while I finished school. When my parents realized I was packing my things, they laughed. "You'll be back," my father said. "The real world isn't as easy as you think." I simply smiled. You might be right, but at least someone there believes me. For the first time in years, I walked out of that house without looking back. They thought they had won. They thought I would eventually apologize, but what they didn't know was that their choices were about to follow them much farther than they ever expected. A few months later, I was healthier than I had been in years. My aunt made sure I attended every medical appointment. She reminded me to carry 2 inhalers. She never treated my condition like an inconvenience. She treated me like family. The confidence I gained changed everything. I graduated with honors. I earned a scholarship. I started speaking openly about invisible illnesses and how dangerous it can be when people dismiss someone's pain. One local newspaper shared my story. Soon after, I was invited to speak at a community health awareness event. I never mentioned my parents by name. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Many people reached out, saying they had lived through similar experiences. That alone made me realize I wasn't alone anymore. Then one evening, my mother called. For the first time in months. "I saw your interview," she said quietly. "I didn't know things were that bad." I closed my eyes. "You knew," I answered. "You just didn't believe me." She started crying. "We made mistakes." I waited. Then she added the words I had wanted to hear my entire childhood. "I'm sorry. It should have fixed everything." But it didn't. Some apologies arrive after trust has already disappeared. A week later, both of my parents came to visit. They looked older, quieter, almost defeated. My father struggled to meet my eyes. "I failed you," he admitted. "I thought I was teaching you to be strong." I looked at him calmly. Believing your child doesn't make them weak. Ignoring them does. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. There was no shouting, no dramatic revenge. Just truth. Sometimes truth is the strongest consequence of all. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It simply stopped the past from controlling my future. Today I live a completely different life. I never ignore my health. I never ignore someone else's pain, because I know what it feels like to beg for help while everyone assumes you're pretending. If there's one lesson my story taught me, it's this. Never dismiss someone's pain simply because you can't see it. A few moments of listening can save a life. And sometimes the greatest justice isn't watching someone fall. It's proving that you can rise, even after the people who should have protected you chose not to believe you.